All right. Everyone found their seats? Great. And after that lovely music, it's now time to present and honor the 2021 winners of the Assar Lindbeck-medaljen, Professor Erik Lindqvist from the Swedish Institute of Social Research, and Professor Robert Östling from the Stockholm School of Economics. And I also want to say and thank the prize committee, which has included David Strömberg at the Stockholm University, Lena Edlund at Columbia University, and Olof Johansson Stenman at Göteborg University. So thank you very much to the prize committee. Erik and Robert have in several noteworthy papers and studies explored the effects of wealth on several different outcomes, on labor supply, on health, and perception of happiness using very clever methods. And their results are important to understand both labor market effects resulting from different political policies, as well as, of course, the relationship between wealth and health. And both Erik and Robert have also made very important contributions in the intersection between political science and economics. And today they will give their prize lecture, which is called On How Wealth Shapes Lives, Evidence from Swedish Lottery Winners. Robert, Erik, welcome.
Okay, hi everyone. We want to talk about our joint research that features prominently in the prize motivation about Swedish lottery winners. From cradle to grave, there is a wide range of behaviors and outcomes that vary with different measures of socio-economic status. To illustrate this, I will show you figures like this one, which on the horizontal axis has some measure of economic status, in this case, parental income. On the vertical axis, there will be some outcome measure. And there will be a line, which in this case shows the average birth weight of infants as a function of their parental income. We will refer to the slope of that line as a socioeconomic gradient. So this figure shows you that the birth weight of children born to parents in the poorest, the lowest income decile weigh approximately 100 grams less than children born to parents in the highest income deciles. And most of this data is from around year 2000 in Sweden, I should say. The socioeconomic gradient then follows children throughout childhood and into adult life. So this figure again shows you the differences depending on your parental income deciles and shows you the grade point average in 9th grade. And as you can see, there is a very steep slope. In this case, if you read the scale, there is a 0.8 standard deviation difference between children to the with parents in the lowest income deciles to children with parents in the highest income decile. Own income then later in life, your own income later in life is systematically related to many different things, right? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. This shows you financial measure of financial behavior, whether you invest in the stock market or not. This shows the same type of figure then for, in this case, adults between 30 and 60. And as you can see, the people in the lowest income decile, roughly 20% own stocks, whereas those in the highest income decile, there's about 70% that own stocks. Today, this is in 2000, so probably the numbers are a little bit higher now. If we move to a completely different outcome, it's, as I said, income is related to so many different things. It's also related to various lifestyle behaviors that are in turn related to health. So this figure gives you two examples. It shows you that the richer you are, the healthier is the diet you eat, and the richer you are, the less likely you are to smoke. In this case, the slope is somewhat less than in the previous figure. It's about 0.3 standard deviation difference between the poorest and the richest. Psychological well-being in this case measured by happiness and life satisfaction, also is strongly positively related to income. So here it's a little bit stronger here. So there's a roughly a half a standard deviation difference between the lowest and the highest income decile. Given the many favorable outcomes that income is associated with, both in birth, in childhood, and throughout adulthood, it's probably doesn't come as a surprise that it follows you all the way into the grave. So this figure shows you mortality, in this case for women that were aged 65 in year 2000, as a function of their wealth. And in this case, it shows you the probability that these women had died in 2020. So the figure shows you that those that to the very left without any wealth, more than half of those had died 20 years later in 2020. Whereas the richest women, they only were less than 30% of them had died in 2020. So there's always a 25 percentage point difference in mortality risk. I think this doesn't come as a surprise to any of you. There are mostly economists in the room, and we have seen this before. Right? It's also what we should expect theoretically. So essentially, all economic models predict that if we relax the budget constraint, that will affect behavior and investment in long-term outcomes. That holds for, and this is what we typically refer to as the income effect, right? And that holds for financial behavior, labor supply. We have models of investments in your own health or in your children's development. However, the figures I showed you doesn't really tell us what the income effect is. So the first reason is that income and wealth are correlated with so many other factors than the two I showed you on each of these figures, right? There's essentially a lot of potential emitted variables we need to control for. There's also a problem of reverse causality, which is very apparent when it comes to health, right? If you earn a lot, you can invest in your health, but I mean, to work and earn an income, you have to be healthy, right? So it goes both ways. Moreover, in many of these figures, I had income, and in many studies, we study economic shocks, which generate both income and substitution effects. So if we want to get at the incredibly estimated income effect, we need variation in unearned income or wealth that is effectively random, that falls like manna from heaven. And this is what Erik is going to talk to. And we are not the first to do this. There is a large literature that tries to do this, but in many of those questions, consensus is still limited. I hand over to you, Erik.
Thank you. Okay, so this introduction leads us on to the lottery project. We started this in 2010 together with David Cesserini and Björn Wallace. And the basic idea and the aim of this project is to use lotteries to estimate credible effects to credibly estimate the effect of wealth on outcomes. Throughout this project, we take a life cycle perspective. And in some cases, this implies that we compare the estimates we obtain from the lotteries to formal life cycle models. In other cases, it just means that we rescale the effect of winning the lottery to corresponding income flows. We take the lottery price and we calculate the corresponding annuity. This in turn allows us to compare the lottery estimates to income gradients. We have data from 3 different lotteries. The first lottery is vinnarkontot, or the winner's account. So these were price-linked savings accounts, which were offered by the commercial banks and the state bank in Sweden. And they were extremely popular during the late 1980s and early 1990s. The way it worked is that you had a bank account, but instead of receiving interest on your savings, you received lottery prizes corresponding to the account balance. The second lottery are televised draws from the Tris lottery. So Tris, as most of you know, are scratch-off lottery tickets that you can buy in basically any store in Sweden. Two types of prizes that you can win on this lottery imply that you qualify for a TV show that's broadcast every morning in Sweden since 1994, TV4 Morgon. So at this show, these winners, they will draw a new lottery ticket and scratch it off during live TV and win something. But some people will win more and some people will win less. As I said, there were two types of prizes. So first there's a lump sum prize, TV Tris. But then there is also a monthly installment, which is paid out over a period of 10 to 25 years. And we convert this monthly installment to net present value. In the other lotteries, we also have lump sum prizes. The third lottery is Kombilotteriet. So it's a lottery run by A-lotterierna, which is a company owned by the Social Democratic Party in Sweden. The way it works is just that you subscribe to a number of lottery tickets that you get in your mailbox every month. All in all, the prize amount in these three lotteries is approximately 7 billion Swedish kronor, which is distributed to more than 400,000 different winners. So to identify the effect of winning the lottery, we create groups of players within which we know the amount won is random. And then we only use this within group variation to estimate the effect of winning the lottery. The exact way by which we construct these groups varies across lotteries, but basically we follow two different strategies. The first is just that we compare winners of small amounts to winners of large amounts in case the amount won is random, conditional on winning. The second strategy is to compare people who won the lottery to people who didn't win, but who had bought the same number of lottery tickets in the same draw. The majority of prizes nowadays are pretty small, so in the order of 1,000 kronor or 10,000 kronor. But the large prizes of, say, 1 million kronor or more are key to identifying the effect. Most of the identifying variation comes from comparing the small prize winners or the non-winners to people who won substantial amounts. Okay, so what does substantial mean here? Well, just to give a rough notion, a typical large prize winner could win in the order of 1/3 of remaining lifetime income. So the prizes are substantial, but they're not enormous typically. Okay, so now let's turn to presenting results from our different papers. We begin with two papers that deal with the effect of winning a lottery on your own health and winning a lottery on your children's health and development outcomes. Okay, so let's first consider the children. So this figure shows the effect of winning a lottery on different child outcomes. So first we have a set of outcomes related to child health, birth weight, different types of drug prescription, body mass index. Then we have a set of outcomes related to child development, so cognitive and non-cognitive skills from the Swedish military draft, grade point average in 9th grade, and results with respect to Swedish, English, and math. All these measures have been standardized, and the effect here is expressed in terms of a 10,000 kronor increase in annual family income. So here we do this income rescaling that I previously mentioned. And we report results in terms of the point estimate and the 95% confidence interval. So what you can see is that with one exception, which is cognitive skills, where you have a slight negatively statistically significant effect, we cannot reject the null hypothesis that there are no effects. So no evidence that winning a lottery affects your children's outcome. Now, of course, not rejecting the null that's of zero effect doesn't mean that there are no effects. So in order to provide some context, we compare these estimated effects to the corresponding parental income gradients. And now I'm going to show you two such comparisons, which are the gradients that Robert started out showing. So the first gradient was birth weight, and we let a red cross indicate the gradient. Okay, so what does this show? It shows the estimated lottery effect is almost identical to the estimated cross-sectional gradient. In other words, we can rule out large negative or large positive effects, but we cannot rule out that the gradient that we observe in the data between parental income and birth weight is actually due to a causal effect of parental income. Right? However, we turn to the other gradient, grade point average, we can reject the gradient. So the gradient is much larger, the estimated effect is much more precise. So this suggests that the reason for why children whose parents have high income perform better in school is not because the parents have high income. So parents with high income do something else that imply that the children perform well in school. And the same overall conclusion holds for all the other child development outcomes. Okay, so now let's turn to adult health, the effect on your own health. And we begin with what's arguably the best indicator of health, which is mortality. This shows you the effect of winning £1 million on mortality risk by time since winning the lottery. And you see that initially there's a slight negative point estimate. This means that mortality risk is lower for people who won large amounts, so their health is better. But then it turns positive, indicating high mortality risk for people who won big, implying worse health. But none of these estimates are statistically significant. So again, we have a null result. Now we compare this to the gradient, and here we consider the wealth gradient, because we're looking at an older sample. We think the wealth gradient is more an appropriate benchmark. So to construct this, we take a representative sample with the same age and gender distribution as the lottery sample. And then we compare mortality risk of people with high levels of wealth and low levels of wealth. And then you see this is strongly negative. So this implies people with high wealth are much less likely to die. Hence, they have better health. And here you can note a clear discrepancy between the causal lottery-based estimate and the gradient, implying we can say that the reason for why the wealthy live longer is probably not because they are wealthy. Something else explains this. Okay. There are other measures of health. We consider hospitalization risk. We consider consumption of prescription drugs. We use a survey that I will soon talk more about to measure subjective health, so self-rated health, and health behavior, so smoking, drinking, dietary habits, exercise. In none of these cases do we find any evidence that winning the lottery affects health, with one exception, which is that lottery winners appear to reduce their consumption of prescription drugs related to poor mental health. And this effect appears to be driven in particular by consumption of anxiolytics that reduces anxiety and hypnotics and sedatives that makes you sleep better. So maybe there's an effect on mental health. Okay. Now we go from the land of health to the closely related land of subjective well-being. And here we use a survey. So this survey we did in collaboration with Statistics Sweden. We sent out the survey to 4,820 participants. We received a response rate of 69%. Importantly, we sent out the survey in 2016, which is between 5 and 22 years after people won the lottery. So we're really in the business of estimating long-term effects here. On average, we survey people 11, 12 years after winning. Okay, so does winning the lottery increase your subjective well-being? Yes, at least it makes you more satisfied. So if you start from the left, you see the effect on happiness. The self-rated happiness is positive, but it's not statistically significant. But one step to the right, where the effect on overall life satisfaction, this effect is positive and statistically significant. One further step to the right, you see that the effect on financial life satisfaction is even larger. So that's satisfaction with your personal finances. Now, that may seem unsurprising. So being satisfied with your finances is arguably sort of the point of winning the lottery. But I would like to remind you that this is on average 11 years after winning. So the fact that we see an effect indicates that lottery winners are able to spend their money and invest their money in a way that increases their long-term overall satisfaction and financial life satisfaction. You also see that we have a small positive insignificant effect on mental health. This is from a survey. This is based on the survey questions about different aspects of mental health. Now, this may seem to go against what I just showed you with respect to prescription drugs. However, if we scale these effects differently, so the survey-based measure of mental health and the prescription drug measure of mental health, you see that the prescription drug measure the effect on that measure is a bit stronger, but the difference is quite small. And the reason why this effect is not close to significant is that because we have a smaller sample, we have less precise estimates. We also ask respondents about the satisfaction with other aspects of well-being. So their health, the spare time, friends, relatives, the home, the neighborhood, society in general. And except for maybe a positive effect on satisfaction with spare time, we don't find evidence of any strong effect. So this suggests that winning the lottery increases your financial life satisfaction in the long term, but other aspects of your life, the satisfaction with those aspects don't change that much. Okay, so now we compare these estimates to gradients, and we compare them to 3 different gradients from different surveys. The bottom line of this figure is just that if you look at overall life satisfaction and financial life satisfaction, the properly rescaled lottery effects are quite similar to the gradients. So that suggests that the reason why people with high income are more happy or have more satisfaction or have high life satisfaction may well be because they have higher income. So maybe the gradient, at least to a significant extent, reflects a causal effect of economic status. Okay, so that was life satisfaction. Now we move on to labor supply. So this is from a paper which was co-authored by Matthew Notovididgo, who is now at Northwestern. Let me start with a brief motivation. So estimating the causal effect of wealth on labor supply, what we also could call the income effect, is useful for a number of reasons. And the first obvious reason is that many policies imply some kind of lump sum transfer. So retirement system, property taxes, welfare payments. And so if we are to evaluate the consequences and the costs of such policies, we must know how people respond with respect to labor supply. From a more theoretical perspective, the income effect also gives you a link between the uncompensated and the compensated labor supply elasticity, which in turn is important for optimal taxation theory and theory of business cycle fluctuations. So there's a very large literature attempting to estimate the income effect, but there's still very much a disagreement as to how big this effect is. Okay, so you win the lottery, your labor supply goes down. So this figure shows the effect of winning 100 kronor on your pre-tax labor market earnings in each year following the lottery win. And as you can see, prior to the lottery win, there are no differences between winners and non-winners, winners of big amounts or small amounts in terms of labor supply. So that's what we should see in case lottery wealth is indeed randomly assigned. But then at the time of winning the lottery, labor supply shifts down and by approximately 1 krona, and then stays at this new lower level, more or less roughly constantly for at least 10 years. So this is what a standard labor supply model, where the interest rate and discount factor are the same, should predict. People behave similar to this model. And it suggests that non-winners are able to smooth the labor supply response, to smooth the consumption of leisure. Okay, so that was the winners. We also look at the household. And then we focus on the married winners and the spouses of the married winners. So when it says spouse on the slide, it means non-winning spouses. The winner is the winning spouse. So we see here first the effect for the married winners is quite similar to the effect that we saw on the previous slide, for example, as a whole. So you use stable supply, you stay at roughly the same level for 10 years. We see also that the spouses also react, so they reduce labor supply. But on this effect is statistically significant, but not by as much as the winners. This difference between the winners and the spouses does not seem to be due to whether the husband or wife won. The husband wins, he reduces labor supply more. The wife wins, she reduces labor supply more. Okay. So why is this interesting? Well, first of all, the fact that the spouse also reacts implies that the total household response is bigger than the response on the winner. So this suggests that if we are to evaluate the labor market, the labor supply response of some transfer, we cannot just look at the recipient of that transfer. We also have to look at the immediate family. Second, the fact that the winners react much more strongly suggests that the division of wealth within a couple will matter for consumption choices. So the decision to work less is, of course, a kind of consumption response here. So consumption of leisure. So this is in contrast to, for example, the unitary model of the household, according to which the household should function as a unit that makes consumption choices irrespective of who in the couple brought in the money. So if people behaved according to the unitary model, we would expect the winner and the spouse to react in a similar fashion. Unless it's the case that it is precisely the spouse that would like to work less who plays the lottery. So playing the lottery in a hope that if I win, I could quit. So that illustrates that argument that even though winning the lottery is random among people who play, the decision to play is not random. And so who in a couple wins may not be random. So to test for that, we restrict the sample to couples in which both spouses play the lottery at the same point in time. And so that is not perfect, but it brings us much closer to a case where we have random assignment of wealth within a couple. And if we do that restriction, this difference increases. So among couples where both play lottery at the same time, the winning spouse reacts much more strong with respect to labor supply. So that suggests that there are at least a substantial fraction of couples who behave not according to unitary model, but according to some kind of model where wealth differences between spouses affect bargaining power. We also use this model, we also use our estimates to estimate a structured model of labor supply with a binary retirement age. And then we use this model for two purposes. The first is that we calculate the marginal propensity to earn out of lottery wealth over your lifetime. Okay, so what's that? Essentially it tells us if you win 100 kroner, how much of that will you spend on reducing your labor supply or your labor market earnings for the remainder of your life? So we sum all these reductions in labor supply over the course of your remaining lifetime. And then we look at that number. So if we do that, we see that this varies by age. So if you win at age 20, the MPE is minus 0.17. This means that these young lottery winners spend 70% of the lottery wealth on working less. Whereas if you win at age 60, the corresponding number is just 4%. We also use it to recover key labor supply elasticities. So calculate a Hickson of 0.10, a Frisch of 0.14. These are at the low end of previously reported estimates. And why is that? Well, it is because even though the income effects that we estimate are very clear, they're quite modest. And these modest income effects translate into modest compensated labor supply elasticities in this model. Okay, so final paper. This is paper on the fact of winning the lottery on stock market participation, and it's co-authored with Joseph Briggs, who is now at Goldman Sachs. Okay, so standard models of consumption and savings suggest that all individuals, or almost all individuals, should invest a fraction of their wealth in equity, so stocks and bonds. And yet, if you look at the data, a substantial fraction of households in Sweden and in other countries hold no equity. So this discrepancy between the basic theory and the data is known as the stock market participation puzzle. And there's a very large literature attempted to explain that puzzle. But one very simple theory or story was put forth by Annette Wissen-Jørgensen. So she argued that even though these models say that everybody should invest, for people who have little wealth, the models only say they should invest little. Right? And so what these people forgo by not investing in the stock market is actually a very small amount. They don't lose out on a lot of returns. And hence, if there are just some modest cost of entering the stock market or participating in the stock market, that could explain non-participation among non-wealthy households. Now, if this is correct, we should see that people who win the lottery, with large amounts, actually enter the stock market. That's exactly what we see. So if you win 1 million kronor, the participation rate goes up by 4 percentage points. And the effect is very stable over time. So from a qualitative point of view, we see exactly what this simple theory suggests. What remains then to explain is how well the theory fits what we see in the data quantitative. So is this effect as large as the theories should suggest that it should be? And to answer this question, we use a structure model, and we calibrate this model based on standard parameters, including cost of entering and participating in the stock market. And then we use the model to simulate the effect of winning the lottery on stock market participation. So essentially asking if this model is true, people behave like this, how big should the effect of winning the lottery on stock market participation be? Then it turns out, if we do that these model-based estimates are 3 times larger than the actual estimates that we see in the data. So in other words, people do react, but according to the model, this effect should be much larger than it actually is. Okay, that raises the question, what explains the discrepancy? And we do a number of analyses, but at the end of the day, these mechanisms, the explanation that has the best fit in our view is that many people have limited financial literacy. And there are 2 arguments in particular in favor of that view. The first is that in the survey that I mentioned, we also ask people about the expected returns from investing in the stock market. And then it turns out a lot of people have very pessimistic beliefs. Too pessimistic if you compare to historical returns. Now, if you take that belief distribution from the survey and we plug it into the model and we simulate the effect of winning the lottery again, that bridges the gap between the model and the data, not fully, but significantly. So a much smaller gap. The second is that if we run this effect of winning the lottery for people with high cognitive skills or high levels of education, we see that they respond much more strongly, much more closely to what the model suggests they should. So these are people who could be presumed to have high financial literacy. Whereas for people with low levels of education or low cognitive skills, they react much less. This suggests that it could be the case that we have some people in population with high financial literacy who behave more or less as these models suggest they should. But then we have other people with low financial literacy who don't behave according to this model. Thank you. I'm leaving the floor to you, Robert.
Yes, I'm still awake. So what did we learn from what Erik was saying? What have we learned from our work on Swedish lottery winners so far? First and foremost, perhaps, we believe that our estimates of the income effects in different domains are important to test and calibrate economic models. But they also, we think, have direct policy relevance. So, for example, then, I mean, our study on adult health and child development suggests that kind of redistribution from rich to poor will do little to reduce health inequalities or to improve the equality of opportunity for children. On the other hand, our study on psychological well-being suggests that the beneficiaries of such redistribution, they will be more satisfied with their life. So there is a benefit of redistribution, but it's relatively limited. So whereas then our results suggest that the benefits of redistribution are limited, our estimates for labor supply suggest that labor elasticities are not that large, so implying that the taxes are not so distortive. So redistribution may not be so costly in terms of the distortion the tax raising the taxes to finance it creates. Our work has also led us to update our own beliefs and perhaps others' beliefs about the usefulness of economic life cycle models. So on the one hand, we were amazed how well the standard simple model of life cycle model of labor supply fits the main results in our data, but also many other results we find in the data. And we were surprised also to see how it appears as lottery winners are actually quite remarkably forward-looking and behave responsibly. On the other hand, as Erik just said, we found that lottery winners don't tend to invest so much in equity as the theories say they should. So in that case, we need to modify the model. For example, I mean, either by incorporating these pessimistic expectations or take limited financial literacy into account in some way. Our results for adult health and child development, on the other hand, found that those effects were probably limited, which suggests that models that emphasize monetary investments are probably not so relevant in the Swedish context. And we should perhaps focus more on models that focus on non-monetary and time investments. We have also learned some methodological lessons. So one thing we noted when we tried to relate our findings to previous quasi-experimental studies is that we found that the effect sizes in published studies are sometimes very large. And it's quite common, actually, that authors don't discuss the magnitude of the effect. They have found a significant effect and leave it at that. But as Erik pointed out, what we are doing, we compare our estimates to the socioeconomic gradient as a point of reference. If you do that for the estimates in many previous papers, you will find that the effects are simply implausibly large in many cases. And we think, I mean, one explanation for this is that the previous studies were simply underpowered. And it's very risky if we conduct underpowered studies and only look at the statistically significant estimates. This can be extremely misleading. And we think this explains, we think that this might explain why, for example, in the previous lottery studies on life satisfaction, the effect sizes that are, the significant effect sizes reported in previous papers are 6 to 60 times larger than what we found. Another reason why previous studies sometimes might be unreliable is that there are so many researcher degrees of freedom. and especially, I think, in studies using observational data. Following the replication crisis in psychology, it has become the norm to do pre-analysis plans in experimental work, but it hasn't been used very much in observation when you're working with observational data. So one advantage with our studies is that we have by now a very good grip on the right-hand side of the identifying variation. So we have, for several of our studies, we have written pre-analysis plans that we specifies exactly which analyses we are going to do. In our mind, I mean, we think, and we have had a very positive experience of this. I think it's both for our own sake. It brings peace of mind because it's very easy to fool yourself, which you're just running different specifications all day. There's so many different ways you can tweak this. But I think it has also helped us in the publication process, and hopefully readers also trust our results more. We've also made an additional methodological lessons, and that's that even in very large data sets, your standard errors can be very misleading sometimes, but I leave that exciting discussion for the mingle afterwards. Although we think we have learned quite a lot, there's still many things that we don't know, and that we need to work more on. So the main concern that economists raise when we talk about the work is to what extent our findings can be generalized to other settings and other contexts. We believe, and it seems like most people seem to agree with us, that our studies have very high internal validity, but you can question the external validity of our studies. So the most common concern people raise is that, well, couldn't it be that lottery players are different? They're different from the population at large. And the effects you estimate for lottery players are different from the effects, might differ from the effects that you would observe if you studied other people. Of course, we cannot know that because we study only these lottery players. But we think it's a little bit reassuring that the lottery data sets we study are very large. It's a very popular lotteries. And the lottery players don't differ that much from the population in general. There are some difference, though, in selection into these 3 different lotteries. But we actually see that as a strength, that the effects that we estimate are similar for the 3 different lotteries, despite the type of players being somewhat different. Another very common concern with our results is that lottery winnings might be different from other types of economic shocks, if such like an inheritance or large entrepreneurial income, for example. Again, that is a possibility that we cannot rule out, but at least we can reject the extremely common myth that lottery winners squander their money, right, and become unhappy and just waste their money. They save quite a lot of the winnings. They had this forward-looking labor supply response, and they tend to actually invest the money in relatively safe assets. There are also other caveats you can raise against what we are doing. So we estimate reduced form individual level effects, and that might not always be what you're looking after, right? So, for example, we find that lottery winnings increase life satisfaction, but we cannot distinguish whether that is due to an increase in your relative wealth, your wealth relative to others, or the absolute increase in wealth. So it's possible that if you were to, for example, give money to everybody so that the relative wealth doesn't increase, that the effect on life satisfaction might be smaller. This is something we cannot know. We also cannot say anything about what the effect would have been for negative wealth shocks. By definition, winning the lottery is a positive wealth shock, and it's conceivable that a negative shock would have a different effect. I mean, in fact, previous studies on the effects of unemployment suggest that can have quite large effects on health, for example. This is something I think we all need to think more about, and there is further work to be done there. If we think of unemployment, for example, that's not just a shock to you how much money you have. Unemployment comes with a lot of other things as well. So I think that's one thing future research should do. I also think, and we also think that it is worthwhile to try to paint a little bit more complete picture of these lottery winners. So that's what we are doing these days and continue to do. So together with different collaborators, we are working on studying political attitudes and political participation, crime, family information, fertility, dental health, financial risk-taking. And there are actually several studies that's still at the planning stage. So while we have reached, or almost have reached the end of this talk, the last study on Swedish lottery winners had not seen the day of the light yet. Okay. So last but not the least, we want to thank you all for coming here and listening to us. It's a great honor to be here. I want to thank Anna Dreber, who she has an office next to me. She's still here, or she escaped. She has the office next to me. I know how much effort she has to put into this conference and this event, so I want to thank her. And then, of course, we want to thank the Assar Lindbeck-medaljen Foundation for awarding us this prize. We are incredibly honored to receive it. We both knew Assar Lindbeck. Erik worked at IFN and I worked at IAS. So collectively, we could meet him every day of the week. He was a great source of inspiration for both of us. I can spend a long time talking about that and how great an honor it is to receive this prize. But we both know Assar. What would Assar have wanted us to do? Well, he would have wanted us to cut the crap and talk about research, even if it's late on Friday night. We also want to give a special thanks to David Cesarini, who is a co-author on all the projects we have talked about today. But he's based in New York, so he's not eligible to get this prize. But of course, we're extremely grateful to him. We're grateful to our other co-authors on the current project, the project we're talking to publish projects, Björn, Joseph Briggs, and Matt Dotter-Vittigdo. And finally, we want to extend our gratitude as well to our current collaborators on this long list of projects that we are currently working on. So thank you all.
Thank you very much, Robert and Erik. You should just take in the big applause for your very interesting research. And of course, we're looking forward to the next paper to come. But now, first, it's time for me to present you with the medal. It's a great honor for me to do that. And it was lovely to hear what an inspiration Assar has been for you. One of my first lectures in economics, when I went to the Stockholm School of Economics in the 80s, we also had Assar as a guest lecturer. So I know he's been a great influence to all of us, I think. And to honor you and to honor Assar, there's this medal, which has been designed by an artist called Annie Winblad-Jakubowski. And she's taken inspiration from Assar. So there's the text, which says Assar Lindbeck-medaljen. And then on the back, there is a portrait of Assar. And she's been inspired by Assar's own artwork, his own paintings, his own self-portraits. Assar was really a Renaissance man. He did many things, and he was quite an avid painter. So, and it's in silver, and it weighs 3 kilos. Robert, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations. Prize comes with some money, some wealth. Let's see
Perfect.
what you win. Not quite a lottery, I would say.
Oh.
It's hard work.
Thank you so much.